Okay, and then on West Bank, the Israel's far-right finance minister, he agreed, this was end of last week, but he finally agreed to release funds for the Palestinian Authority. It was a tit-for-tat exchange for legalizing, or for Israel legalizing 5 Israeli settlements. Do you have a comment on this kind of tit-for-tat engagement? Is that something that the US would tolerate moving forwards? If there's anything that belongs to the Palestinian Authority that should go to them, what's your comment on them saying we'll only do it if we legalize that?
I'm a bit confused because, the reason these outposts are created by settlers one of the reasons is to draw in the Israeli military, because they then are a protection force for those settlers that are there. So you say they're inconsistent with international law, they're destabilizing, but you are at the same time arming the military force that goes to protect the people that do it. I mean, isn't that a very confused policy?
Since you mentioned it, how is that Leahy review of the one unit?
I don't have any updates for you, Matt.
So in other words, there hasn't been anything done.
That's not true. That's not true at all.
That's not true?
When I stood behind this podium and
They
talked about it,
haven't been given a clean bill of health or given, given
that
I don't know,
particular
red
unit,
notice or
that
whatever they
particular
call it.
unit, it continues to be under review. But on that same day,
how long has
Matt,
that been
please
under
don't
review now?
interrupt me.
Vedant,
That same
come on.
day, I also talked about a number of other units.
Hello everybody, just to say a quick hi, because I suppose it's been quite a few days since I last interacted with you lovely people. First of all, I want you to go and watch these 2 videos here. You can see back to back these 2 videos. Essentially, these 2 videos are about the interview that I did earlier today with Khalid Mahmood, who has been UK's longest serving British Asian MP. He is from Labour. It was very important for me to know his thoughts about various other issues, because he was once very close to Jeremy Corbyn. So I really wanted to know what he thinks about the humiliating treatment meted out to his former leader by his current leader, Keir Starmer. And then he also talked about George Galloway and his party's chances both in Birmingham, West Midlands, and across the country. And various other issues, Gaza, and the anger that he and his party colleagues have been facing up and down the country. So do watch these 2 videos here. Do watch. That said, let's talk about today's video. So this video is about today's State Department press briefing by Indian origin spokesperson Vedant Patel. Now, we know that Vedant Patel and his colleague Matthew Miller both have been incredibly irritating with their well-rehearsed lines that they have been parroting without realizing whether those lines make sense or not. So today, again, Middle East was a dominating topic in the press conference, starting from the tension in Lebanon to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and Israeli forces' new strike in Khan Yunus camp. Now, while explaining that, there were 2 journalists who we have seen over the past 8 or 9 months who have never minced words when it came to giving grief to State Department, or basically calling out State Department's lies, because that's what State Department has been doing day in and day out, without caring about the global implications and how they are being perceived across the world. So they were talking about West Bank and how the finance minister, who is quite a right-wing chap within the Israeli government, he had withheld the money which was meant for Palestinian Authority. Now, he has decided to release a part of that money in exchange of Palestinian Authority legalizing their illegal settlements. What is illegal settlements? Israeli militants or terrorists coming and dislodging the occupants, Palestinian occupants, from their land, from their houses, and staking claims on those pieces of lands and houses. That's a brutal way that they go about doing things almost every day. These were like few settlements where they had occupied or stolen Palestinian lands and their houses and staked their claims. This guy, Vedant Patel, comes and tries to give many excuses, and as you can make out, it makes no sense, absolutely no sense. And now I was just beginning to get irritated until I realized that Matt has butted in, and he started saying exactly the kind of things that I would have said if I was in that press briefing. So watch this. Watch this. I know it's irritating. I mean, just imagine this guy or his colleague, Matthew Miller, when it comes to describing the illegality of Israelis, they say this is inconsistent with international laws. They're not saying that they're breaking international laws. Is their disingenuous way of saying that what Israelis do, they never commit any illegal things. They never commit any illegal things. They only do things which are not consistent with international laws. Now imagine how frustrating this is, how blood boiling that can be. But that's what the world is. I mean, it's not easy to maintain your sanity in the face of such illogical utterances. A salute to all those journalists, upright journalists, who managed to keep their calm in that press conferences. Anyway, I won't take much of your time. Do watch today's press conference.
On the Middle East,
Yeah.
and as it relates to one, Gaza, but two, Lebanon. So one on Gaza, is there any movement at all that you guys have seen on this ceasefire proposal? And then two, on Lebanon, where do things stand now, if they're any different than they were yesterday? And if they're not different than yesterday, then okay.
On the second part, they are not different from yesterday, but let me just, to the first part of your question, echo what the Secretary said at the Brookings Institution yesterday, is that we continue to be in intense effort with our partners in Egypt, our partners in Qatar, to see ways that we can close the gap that Hamas created in not saying yes to a proposal that everyone, including the United Nations, including the Israelis, had said yes to. That is something that we are working around the clock, literally as we speak. And in the context of Israel's northern border, as I said yesterday, restoring calm on the blue line continues to be a priority, and we believe that a ceasefire in Gaza could bring about a calm to the conflict in the north as well, creating conditions for the displaced in both Israel and Lebanon to return home. And that's something we're going to continue to work towards.
Okay, so as it relates to Lebanon, you don't see anything over the last 24 hours that makes you more or less, or I don't know, is there anything that you see that makes you more or less concerned about?
Matt, I have seldom offered specific analysis to events like that. I will just leave it broadly again that this is an immense priority for this administration. We want to see calm along the blue line. We believe that it needs to be a priority for not just Lebanon but also Israel, and this is something that we're continuing to work through.
Could I
Sean,
follow up? I know he doesn't work in the building, but Amos Hochstein is in Paris, if not mistaken. Can you say anything about why he's there, what the U.S. is trying to do?
I don't have any updates as it relates to Mr. Hochstein's travel. I'm sure my colleagues at the White House and the National Security Council would be happy to offer any information, and we'll also check with the team. We'll also check with the team to see if there's any context to offer from this building. I'm sure they would, Matt.
No, I don't think that.
Maybe other questions in the Middle East have some things on other topics.
Why don't we see if there's anything more on the Middle East region, and then I'm coming back to you. Camilla's had her hand up, Saeed. I promise I will get to you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Vedant. Sticking on Lebanon, the New York Times is reporting that Israel's top generals want a ceasefire to start as soon as possible without Hamas having to be eliminated, that Hamas could still remain in power. They want to do this in order to reportedly to get the hostages out, which is is something that everybody wants. Do you have a comment on that at all? And obviously this is no surprise given that we've seen IDF spokespeople come out and say Hamas cannot be defeated, and where is there anything that you can give us on
So I'm just not going to offer analysis on the back and forth in terms of the negotiations and the assessments that might be ongoing as it relates to the ceasefire proposal. What I can say is that when President Biden laid this out a number of weeks ago, we made clear that this three-phased approach that the UN Security Council endorsed, that Israel supported, is ultimately the best way to end the violence in Gaza and ultimately end the conflict. We believe that it is the best path to ensuring all the remaining hostages can be released. We think it's the best path to ensuring that humanitarian aid is able to get into Gaza. And so ultimately, Hamas has a choice here, and they have the opportunity to alleviate some of the suffering of the Palestinian people. And so would echo what I said yesterday, is that the time for haggling is over and that there's a proposal that's on the table.
So that main goal of getting a ceasefire does not require immediate defeat of Hamas.
We have been pretty clear also that we do not want to see Hamas in charge of Gaza anymore. The secretary was clear about this at the Brookings Institution yesterday, and beyond that, it's something that he laid out last fall when talking about certain principles that the United States views as non-starters when we're talking about the day after this conflict ends. And a key tenet of that, of course, is Gaza no longer being a springboard for terrorism against the Israeli people, and Hamas no longer being the governing authority there either.
Okay, and just on Lebanon, just following up on that, there's absolutely no change in security posture for the embassy there? Anything?
I have no updates to offer. I will just use this opportunity to echo, because you all know how much I love travel advisory warnings, that the travel advisory warning for the entire country of Lebanon continues to be at a level 3 at reconsider travel, and specifically the regions of the border bordering Israel, as well as the borders in the north bordering Syria, are at a level 4 of do not travel.
Okay, and then on West Bank, the Israel's far-right finance minister, he agreed, this was end of last week, but he finally agreed to release funds for the Palestinian Authority. It was a tit-for-tat exchange for legalizing, or for Israel legalizing 5 Israeli settlements. Do you have a comment on this kind of tit-for-tat engagement? Is that something that the US would tolerate moving forwards? If there's anything that belongs to the Palestinian Authority that should go to them, what's your comment on them saying we'll only do it if we legalize settlements?
So first, on the issue of correspondent banking, our view is that ultimately these are PA funds. These are funds that belong to the Palestinian Authority. And so we, of course, welcome reports that Israel will extend the correspondent banking relationship for 4 months and to release a portion of the PA's clearance revenues. But our call is for Israel to extend correspondent banking for at least 12 months and to release the rest of the withheld clearance revenues as well. It's important to remember that the viability of the Palestinian Authority is essential to stability in the West Bank, which in turn is essential to Israel's own security interests as well. We have made these concerns clear to our partners at Israel at the highest level, and we'll continue to engage with them on this issue. Now, separately, it should come as no surprise to you that we view the expansion of settlements and outposts as inconsistent with international law, and again, we view these as something that only serves to weaken Israel's security. Unilateral actions like settlement expansion and legalization of outposts, they are detrimental to a two-state solution. So we'll continue to use the tools at our disposal to expose and promote accountability for those who threaten peace and stability in the region. Go.
Point.
Sure. Let me. Tom wants it. I promise I'll get to you, Said. Go ahead.
I mean, just on this reported Smotrich deal, and you've said that you obviously see outposts as inconsistent with international law, but I'm just a bit confused because, you know, the reason these outposts are created by settlers one of the reasons is to draw in the Israeli military, because they then are a protection force for those settlers that are there. So you say they're inconsistent with international law, they're destabilizing, but you are at the same time arming the military force that goes to protect the people that do it. I mean, isn't that very confused policy.
So we have a security relationship with the government of Israel, Tom. That is no surprise to you or anybody in this room. Let's also remember that Israel, when we talk about their security relationship and the threats they are facing, it is not simply just about the West Bank and Gaza. They have threats that they deal from other malign actors in the region. Hezbollah in the north, Iran and other proxies that partake in destabilizing activities across the region. Now, when it comes to the provision of specific arms and articles, whether they are used in Gaza or the West Bank or used in other operations that our partners in Israel are conducting, there are clear protocols and policies in place, as well as our continued engagement to ensure that security assets are, when used, that their impact on civilians are minimized and that they are used in accordance to the way that the United States has provisioned them. That does not detract from our long-standing view that such kind of settlement activities is inconsistent with international law. And ultimately, when we're talking about a more peaceful, more stable region, it's a detraction from that as well.
But I don't ask, I just ask not because these are sort of one-off incidents, but this is systemic. Outposts, and now they're being legalized by the finance minister as part of this apparent deal. Outposts are there, one of the reasons that they exist is very specific. It draws in the military to Palestinian-owned land, and in many cases is privately owned Palestinian land that is taken by settlers. So it's more than just inconsistent with international law. It would be seen by any objective observer as the theft of land. And the point I'm making is that you're arming the military force that goes in to protect the people that do that.
So when it comes to the oversight of the security assets that we provide to any country, including Israel, there are, of course, accountability measures and protocols in place to ensure that such assets are used responsibly. And
those protocols are not obviously in place for these particular actions, because it's been going on for years and years. And now you have the Israeli government actually, as part of a deal, not to withhold, correspondent banking, which is.
Tom, I stood behind this podium.
These are not individual incidents. This is something that.
Tom, I stood behind this podium a number of months ago to talk about how this administration used the Leahy Law to look into the use of American security assets in particular units that may or may not have been operating in the West Bank. So I don't want to get into a back and forth on the specific provision of arms, because that's a level of technical detail that we're just not in a place to get to. What I can say and reiterate again is that our security relationship with Israel is robust. It is far greater than just the West Bank and Gaza, that there are real, legitimate threats that Israel faces in the region. But when it comes to the provision of American security articles, there are accountability measures in place that the United States continues to have at its disposal to ensure that those articles are being used responsibly and for its intent. But simultaneously, it is also true that it is our view that settlement activity and outposts are inconsistent with international law.
But the point I'm making is you say that's your policy, but it's actually not your policy. It's something you're saying, but what you're actually doing is militarizing the force that allows those outposts
to absolutely exist. Is our policy, Tom, and we have taken a number of steps.
So many of these are on land.
It absolutely is our policy, and over the course of this administration, especially in the past few months, we have taken a number of steps to hold those accountable who we believe to be perpetuating violence and destabilizing actions in the West Bank.
So, wait, Vedant, since you mentioned it, how is that Leahy review of the one unit?
I don't have any updates for you, Matt.
So in other words, there hasn't been anything done.
That's not true. That's not true at all.
That's not true?
When I stood behind this podium and talked about it,
they haven't been given a clean bill of health or given, given a
that particular unit,
notice or
that particular unit, it continues to be under review. But on that same day,
how long has
Matt,
that been
please
under
don't
review
interrupt
now?
me.
That
same day, I also talked about a number of other units in which, consistent with the memorandum of understanding that we have with Israel, we worked to identify issues and remediate and rectify those problems, so the security relationship with those particular units could persist. The point that I'm making is that we have levers at our disposal.
Okay, how long has it been since that's been under review? Yeah,
It
for
would-
that one unit?
It would have been a number of weeks, and I don't have any
A
updates
number of
for you.
weeks. Well, that could be like 52, that could be 100.
It was not 52. I believe
No,
we
I know,
last
but
talked
it's
about
more
this.
than a month.
Sure. I don't have any
Definitely more
updates
than
for
a
you.
month.
The point that I'm making, Matt, is
Okay,
that
so where's the accountability then?
we have a number of tools at our disposal, and you have
Mm-hmm.
seen this administration utilize them when it comes to
Okay,
the government
what
of
have
Israel.
you utilized? What tool have you utilized so far, other than the 2,000-pound bombs, the suspension?
We
What
just
else?
were talking about how we used Leahy vetting, but beyond that, there
But
continue
you
to be
didn't
other
use-
processes.
You haven't used Leahy vetting. You haven't suspended
Because
anything.
consistent with Leahy vetting is identifying
Okay,
paths to
so-
remediation
So
and rectifying that problem.
what other accountability measures have you used, other than the one small
point that I-
shipment of weapons that has been held up?
Matt, what I
else
said
has
was
there
that
been?
there are levers at our disposal, and we have
What-
spent
okay,
a number
what
of
are they?
times talking about them. The CHURG process is an example. The
what?
Leahy process, the CHURG.
Yes,
Don't act
okay,
confused. We have
yes.
talked about
No,
the
no,
CHURG
no,
process
yes,
a number of
okay.
times.
And the
here.
Leahy process.
The Leahy
and
process.
the Leahy process has resulted in what
Matt,
so far?
the point of the Leahy process and consistent
And the
with
TURG
our
process.
memorandum
What has
of
been the
understanding.
result of that so far?
Consistent with the memorandum of understanding that we have with Israel, we had worked to rectify and remediate those problems. The point to Tom's question was that we have tools at our disposal for the responsible use of their security assets. That does not detract from our long-held belief that settlements and outpost activity are inconsistent with international law.
I think Vedant, the problem is that what he's raising and what a lot of other people are raising is that yes, you do have these levers, but you're not using them.
We're also not going to speak to active and ongoing deliberative processes from up here. Said, go ahead.
Thank you. Before I go to Gaza, I just want to follow up on the West Bank to Tom's question on the settlement. Is there any evidence, do you have any evidence that the Israelis listen to what you say, your expression of displeasure with the settlement and so on, let alone heed your warnings and so on this settlement? Has there been a shred of evidence over the past so many months? You know, you've spoken against the settlement and the spirit of settlement. Do you have any evidence that they actually said, okay, now we better stop because the United States is getting angry?
I'm not going to speak to private diplomatic conversations, Said, but over the course of this conflict, when we have raised things with our partners in Israel, they have heeded our feedback, and I'm not going to parse it more specifically than that.
But this is actually, I mean, that's a physical thing that you can point to. Has there been any sort of, tearing down a settlement, backing off plans to increase housing, by so many folds and so on? Has there been any evidence as a result of your warning time and time again and telling them that this is a violation of international law?
I'm not going to speak to our diplomatic conversations more specifically, but it's our hope that Israel is also interested in preserving and maintaining its own security in the region, and that's why we have been so clear that such kind of activities are not just inconsistent with international law, but a detraction from Israel's security as well.
On Gaza, I wanted to ask a couple of questions. Now, the Israelis ordered new Khan Yunis evacuation, and we heard the Secretary of State say yesterday that there's no sign that Israel is really lowering the intensity of its attacks on Gaza, and we also hear of looming starvation in Gaza. I mean, this is really a very horrific situation. Are you guys sort of reconciled? This is the order of the day. Things will go on like this indefinitely. I mean, do you have any kind of vision how this thing is going to end? When will it end? What is the United States of America doing about it?
Said, let me say a couple things because I spoke a little bit about this yesterday. I know you were out yesterday, but first, as it relates to the activities in Khan Yunis, our viewpoint continues to be that any kind of forced displacement or forced relocation of Palestinians, of course, would be inconsistent with what the United States wants for the region and inconsistent with the principles that the Secretary laid out. That being said, it is, of course, Israel and the IDF has a right to defend itself from terrorism in accordance with international law. And as it is conducting these operations, it is fully appropriate for them to warn and encourage evacuation of civilians from potential areas where they may or may not be conducting operations. But specifically in Khan Yunis, we have seen Hamas moving back into areas previously cleared by the Israeli military. And yet just yesterday, we understand that Hamas fired 20 rockets at Israel from the East Khan Yunis region yesterday. Of course, how these operations are conducted matters, and Israel needs to take every feasible precaution to protect civilians in their operation. But more importantly, Saeed, to your point about when will this end and when will this conflict end, let's not forget, and I think too often in this room we tend to find ourselves forgetting that just a number of weeks ago, the president laid out the tenets of a ceasefire proposal that would bring the hostages home, that would allow for an influx of humanitarian aid, that would put us on a path to diplomacy for the region, to get us to a region that is more integrated, more secure, and more stable. And at every turn, what we have seen happen is Hamas has moved the goalposts, it has changed the parameters, it has come back asking for different things, even though it had previously approved various iterations of this proposal before. Let's not forget that this is a proposal that Israel had accepted, that the United Nations had accepted, that partners in the Arab world had accepted, and that, of course, as I said, it's something that the United States was pushing for as well. So if there's an interest in seeing this conflict end, if there's an interest in bringing about some sort of relief for the Palestinian people, the solution is quite simple. Hamas can stop haggling and they could accept the ceasefire proposal that has been on the table.
But can you tell us that with certainty that Israel accepts this?
Israel itself
have we heard the Prime Minister of Israel say?
Israel itself said that it accepted the proposal that the president laid out.
Did the Prime Minister say that himself?
They did.
Did he say that I accept this proposal as submitted and approved at the Security Council at the United Nations?
Saeed, I'm happy to help you look at Google after this and look up who in the Israeli government did or did not say things as it relates to the proposal.
One last
but
question.
I just want to be very clear that this is a proposal that Israel itself has said that they supported.
All right.
Go ahead.
Let me ask you one last question on wounded Palestinians telling the BBC, more wounded Palestinians telling the BBC that they have been held as human shields and so on. Are you aware of these reports, and do you have any comment on that?
Sorry, could you be a little bit more specific about what you're referring to?
Well, there were reports by the BBC that more Palestinians, we saw this, I guess, 10 days ago and so on, when the Israelis strapped a wounded Palestinian in the front of a Jeep. Now, it seems that this is basically was used time and time and time again. I was wondering if you are aware of these reports and if you have any comments.
So on those specific
practice.
Reports, Saeed, we have seen those disturbing reports in the video. The Israeli military and the IDF itself said that it was investigating the incident and that what was portrayed in those videos did not reflect its values and was a clear violation of its orders and procedures. I will let them speak to that, but we call again Israel to swiftly investigate and ensure accountability for any abuses and violations. And we'll continue to make clear to the government of Israel that there are, of course, expectations to behave consistent with the law of armed conflict.
Thank you very much for watching this video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.